Hello, I'm Greg Scully with 501 Commons, and welcome to this training today. We're really excited to have you here. Just wanted to give you a quick overview of 501 Commons. If you're not familiar with us, we provide services to nonprofits so that they can grow and thrive. And we've got everything from HR, finance, administration for your databases. We offer board development classes and all sorts of other services you can find on our website, which is 501commons.org. Next slide, please. Yeah. So the GiveBIG resources that we have are the campaign guide, the logos, the toolkits, and more. And they are in the resource center when you log in to your Washington Gives profile. And so make sure that you are receiving the Fundraising Accelerator newsletter every 2 weeks. Okay. And the key dates we have are right here. And Ariel will be discuss these a little bit with you also. We're just going to make sure that everybody knows about those things. And next slide, please. It is my pleasure to introduce you today to Ariel Glassman. She'll be leading this presentation. Ariel is no stranger to the GiveBIG campaign. She's been doing it for at least 5 years. So I'm going to turn the presentation over to Ariel. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you, Greg. Greg is right. I think I've taught this workshop first for Seattle Foundation and now for 501 Commons, I think 5 of the last 6 years. So I am no stranger to GiveBIG. And in fact, I love giving days. I love grassroots fundraising. This is my favorite stuff. A little bit more about me. I am a fundraising consultant and I run a company called Common Great. And we do forward-looking fundraising strategy, campaigns, and technology advising for nonprofits. You can check out our website, learn more about me, learn more about my team. But I'll just share today that I have 20 years of experience in fundraising and spent the last 10 as a consultant. And I have been running GiveBIG campaigns for places that I worked and places that I've consulted for since the very first GiveBIG campaign in 2011. So what you're learning today is coming from a deep place of contextual understanding of overall fundraising strategy, not just online donor campaigns or giving days or things like that. And really, I try to build in as much real true fundraising strategy into these as I possibly can. Why don't we get started? We do want to acknowledge the land. And I want to just name that, especially where 501 Commons offices is. This is a statewide campaign, but where 501 Commons is located are the homelands of the tribes of the Coast Salish and Duwamish people. That is where I am broadcasting from as well. And so we want to name that we respect and honor these people and their sovereign tribal nations, and that our community has been enriched by the past and present stewardship of their lands and their contributions to our history, our culture, and economy. It's just important to name that as we all go forth, raising money for the incredible missions that are situated on the land of the Coast Salish and Duwamish people. So, our agenda today. My plan is to move through content pretty quickly, by the way, so that we have time for Q&A at the end. And just want to make sure that everybody has a chance to ask nuanced and detailed and thoughtful questions if they come up. But please do hold them, but you can feel free to toss them in the chat if you want to sort of get them on the record for later. It's pretty informal though. So we're going to talk about a couple key concepts first that really underpin some of the other pieces here. And then in short order, I want to just impress upon folks why it's important to do a match, talk through the strategic potential of some of the new platform capabilities with the Mighty Cause system, which I'm really excited about, and go through some types of matches and how you might calibrate your match strategy. Maybe how and why you might want to use multiple matches, how you might time your matches in the context of early giving and the 2-week campaign or the 2-day campaign, pardon me. Where might you source your match from? And then tying it all together, I just wanted to reflect on all of these pieces through an equity lens to make sure that we are considering equitable fundraising practices as we move through our GiveBIG preparation. So I will start here. So if you have come to one of my workshops before, either for GiveBIG or otherwise, you have heard me talk about the UShape a lot. And so I just want to name that fundamentally fundraising campaigns are U-shaped. And what that means is we see a lot of action at the beginning and at the end. and not so much in the middle, sort of a saggy middle there. This is really typical. It's based on a lot of human psychology. 5-year-long capital campaigns have this pattern and shape. One-day giving days have this, pattern and shape. So it's sort of a fundamental thing upon which we can build some really interesting strategy. The reason that campaigns are like this, or one of the reasons that campaigns are like this with the UShape, is due to what is called the goal proximity effect, which is another thing you've probably heard me talk about if you've worked with me or taken one of my workshops. And that is based on the fundamental principle that the closer a goal is, the more motivated people are to help you achieve it. And in a fundraising context, that means that the closer you get to that goal, the more people are likely to give. So there's an acceleration that happens, with your distance to the goal. As it shrinks, people see very clearly, my $50, I know what it will accomplish when we're only $500 from the goal. I'm going to act now. So it's about people understanding when their actions are going to move the needle and acting then. And so the reason I bring this up now is because it very much impacts your strategy for matches, particularly the timing of matches, whether you might choose to pursue multiple matches. So I just kind of wanted to name these things up front because they will come up again. So one thing I want to just right off the bat say is, why should you do a match? I get this question a lot, and I hear it from board members, I hear it from staff members, I hear it from donors. Matches are just fake. They don't, they must not work or whatever. I sort of think people are really kind of raising an eyebrow at matches a lot, but the truth is they work, and there's a lot of data. And when I say match, I mean both actual conditional matches where you don't get $1 until $1's come in, as well as challenge matches, which are less about traditional matching and more about the idea that it's very public that somebody has committed a substantial gift to something, and they are sort of challenging the rest of the community to join them, but it's not technically a match. But for both of those types of matches, there's a ton of data. So I put some sources in here. If this still feels unbelievable to you, please, take a look when you get the slides in your email afterwards, and you'll see some really neat data and stats there. And we know that matches, they just bring up the overall likelihood of giving, they convert, they bring your gift size up, they help you raise more, and they actually help with donor acquisition, sheer number of donors as well. And there's some really fun stats you see below that from a giving platform in the UK that did a big data dump from analysis and surveys of all their campaigns and their donors. And they found some really compelling evidence about matches work. So I'll get off my high horse about that. You probably wouldn't be in this workshop if you didn't already suspect that maybe you would be doing a match, but I wanted to erase any skepticism anybody had up front before we really dove into planning it all out. So new platform capabilities. I cannot tell you guys how excited I was when I got access to the back end of the new Mighty Cause system, because it has much more robust capability in terms of being able to put matches into the system and how you use them, even how you structure them. So I want to talk you through some of these things because you won't have seen them on the back end of last year's platform, and they really do present new opportunities. And some of these, there's a lot more to dig into, and those are some of the topics we'll talk about after we look at this overview. So number one, you can see I've got matching grants, plural, circled here because the system allows you to put in multiple matches, which I'm like, hallelujah. If you've taken last year or the previous year's workshops, you know that I'm all about how you make multiple matches work, but we've never had a system before that baked it in and allowed us to really have multiple matches and really truly leverage them through the platform. So that's exciting. You get a chance to identify your match sponsors by name. So there's a certain way in which you might want to publicize this. You can also keep them anonymous. So you have flexibility here. You might have a match you want to put in and use, but you don't have to share the name. And that's just, again, extra functionality that I think is new to the scenario. You can choose whether or not your totals and your metrics, there's a lot of metrics that can come out of these campaigns, whether or not the match is included in that, which is great for analysis and also just for choosing how you present the optics to your community about the match and what it's accomplishing for you. Because you have multiple matches, we are able to name them internally. And then you can see I have it in all caps, which means I'm really excited about it. Number 6 right here is time-based. So you can set matches to turn on automatically at a certain time and to end at a certain time. And that is actually really exciting because it helps create efficiencies And especially if you're doing multiple matches, you can like set that and forget it, like a Ronco rotisserie grill. Probably just aged myself with that reference. You can set it and forget it before the campaign even starts and just let the system carry out what you've instructed it to do in terms of turning the matches on or off. It doesn't stop there. The platform allows us to look at multiple match types. This is another big topic we'll come to right after this, but you can either match a percentage of each donation, could be 100 or whatever, or a cumulative threshold match, which is more like the Kickstarter style, right? Where you don't get anything until a certain goal has been met, as opposed to really metering it out along the way. We will talk more about the difference between these two in just a second, but I just want to name that this is new functionality, and I particularly love seeing it when we come back to look at matches through an equity lens. Customizable match conditions is another one, and we will talk through again the implications of why you may want to check or uncheck some of these options based on your match strategy. And also there is a notification to the match donor when the match is met. So it can, again, a little bit of automation and workflow stuff to help managing this campaign and managing all the relationships in it a little easier for you guys. So let's talk about match type. And we're coming back to a percent of the dollars or a threshold. So on the left, we have a little screenshot of the setup widget for when you choose a percentage, right? So you can actually make it match 100%. You can make it match 50%. And Greg, we might want to confirm this, but I think you can even match it like 200%. I think you could set whatever ratio you might be interested in. What I will say is that there's research showing that once you go beyond a double match, like if you give $1, our matching donor will contribute $2, which makes a total of $3. Any ratio higher than that, there's a lot of evidence to show it's not actually more motivational than a 2-to-1 or a 1-to-1 match. So while we're talking about this, I just wanted to share that tidbit because I have seen organizations go all in on like we're going to do a 5X match. And at that point, there's diminishing returns over maybe doing a double match or just a single 1-to-1 match. You can also choose to match up to a maximum dollar amount per donation. And overall, this setup applies your match to your totals in real time until it's used up. And that is great for if you have an aggressive goal where you're really, got a strategy with your match that is all about leveraging that UShape and what we know about it and leveraging closeness to goal to really accelerate and pick up speed towards getting to your goal. And setting a maximum amount can limit major donors from eating up all the match. I mean, you could have a $5,000 match and have one person come in and go, oh my God, I'm so inspired. I'm going to give $5,000. And then poof, the power of the match has dissipated because all of a sudden the total got eaten up by one person's gift. I've seen that happen before. And on the one hand, yay, major donors. On the other, we want everyone to be able to feel like they have a seat at the table and an ability to be part of this proposition. And more people, can be motivated by it and more donors can be acquired by it, et cetera. So this is something really interesting to consider. If somebody gives 5,000, but you've got a maximum of 1,000, can help extend the lifespan and the breadth and the effectiveness of what your match is there to accomplish. The other type is the threshold match. And so again, this applies the matching amount only after you've reached a specific goal that you've set or, sort of a threshold that you've crossed. And again, I come back to, we're all familiar with that sort of Kickstarter style where it's like, we don't get to our goal, we don't get any of it. In this case, if you don't get to whatever goal you set, the match does not kick in visibly. And what I really like here, take a look at the two options underneath cumulative threshold. I've got my mouse going. I don't know if you guys can see it, but there is not only apply total match when total dollars raised equals the match value. There's apply total match when a certain quantity of donations is received or a certain number of unique donors is reached. And this allows for matches based on participation, not dollars. So again, when we talk at the end about wrapping this all up with an equity lens, that's a really intriguing thing to try to spark participation from people who can give at any point on the spectrum of, or at any size donation. And that's not always the case with the more traditional, the percent type matches or the ways that matches have been able to be calibrated on past platforms that we've used for GiveBIG. I really like this, and I encourage you to think creatively about whether a threshold match about either like unique donors or total number of donations is right for you. The unique donors one can really help acquire new donors too. So that's a fun piece of that. So that is why you might want to choose one or the other of these matching propositions. The one people are going to be most used to, and probably the one that is easiest to message, is probably the more traditional percentage match, just because that's what everybody's known. But don't hesitate to dive into some of these other little new pieces of functionality for your strategy at all. So let's come back to, hey, we were here. Let's come back to match conditions. This is another sort of options widget inside the back end of the platform. And let's unpack some of these. So one is an option to set a minimum per donation amount before your match is applied. So what this means is it's going to create a floor. So if you set $10, somebody who gives $5, they're not going to get matched if the minimum donation is $10. Now, this, I think, brings us a little bit in the opposite direction from what we just talked about in terms of matches based on participation and things like that. But it will drive up your average gift size in response to the match, and probably for the whole campaign. That said, average gift size is a metric that can be wielded in many directions and is not necessarily the biggest metric of success. And this might leave some people who can only give $5 or $10 or $15, feeling left out, which is not a thing we necessarily want to do, but it's there. And I think there are organizations with really sophisticated strategies, or perhaps multiple matches, where one of them could have this condition set and it could play a role in really driving revenue to the campaign. Including offline donations in the match. That's pretty new too. You might have somebody who's written a check and mailed it in, and it arrives on the day of GiveBIG, and you want to make sure it's reflected there. So not only can offline donations go into the system, we can choose whether or not to include them in the match. I would say doing so is a good idea. And whether or not your peer-to-peer fundraisers are included. There's probably a weird scenario out there where you wouldn't, for whatever strategic reason, want peer-to-peer donations to be part of your match. But I think the vast majority of the time, it is just going to create more leverage and more success for your peer-to-peer fundraisers if they can promise the people they're raising money from that their donation is going to get matched too. So this automatically will look at the gifts to the child pages to your campaign and roll those up into the match and make it part of it as well. And apply match once per donor. This is sort of like some of the other things we've looked at where you might be setting a floor for what counts, or you might, so apply match once per donor. This is going to help stretch it out over a longer period of time, because you might have a situation where you have people making multiple donations. And let's say somebody gets super excited and they're just into it and they're going to make 3 donations to you across the whole campaign. If you check that box, only their first one will get into the match. And again, that just allows more room for more people to be in a position where they can be motivated by and have this match apply to their giving. An auto notification of the match donor. So I love this because, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but on giving days, I'm really busy. Like, you're sitting there, you are sort of running the show. You might be doing instant stewardship and trying to reach out to every donor as quickly as you can after you see their gifts roll in, and oops, your match got met, but you're so busy that you maybe didn't have time to let the donor know right away. So this can do it for you. But I will say, don't substitute it eventually for more personal outreach and stewarding that donor. Don't rely only on this. It is helpful in sort of a tactical way on a very busy giving day, but don't rely on it to do your thinking and stewarding and informing of your match donor about the fact that they've been successful. So those are very specific technical things. If you're going to the webinar tomorrow, Bethany, I believe her name is, will be talking more about really how you actually use this capability in the back end. We're going to gloss over that for now, and I'm just going to cover the strategic implications. But if you have questions about, the finer points of what happens when I check this box, or what happens if I set this condition, Bethany will be able to give you the really fine-tuned answers on that. For us, I'd like to now talk about multiple matches. So I have given this advice before. When I was looking back at my workshop that I taught last year, I advised people to do multiple matches, but I noted that only one of the matches would be able to sort of be contained by the system. And then it became incumbent upon the organization to really market that match and to try to drive people through it, even though it wasn't able to show up in the totals online. It made it harder to do that. This year, is a totally different story. But why might you want to do this? So for one thing, you might have multiple objectives with GiveBIG. You might want to, raise X dollars, but also acquire X donors. So by choosing different types of matches and setting the conditions differently, you might be able to accomplish two different things that make GiveBIG a very useful tool in your annual development plan for multiple reasons. So, let's take a look at what some of these goals could be. So you could be wanting to increase your average gift size, right? Really drive up the amount of people's gifts. That classic one-to-one dollar-based percentage match will do that. You might drive donor acquisition by having your second match focus on achieving a certain number of donors and really only unlock the funding when that has happened. You might want to look at the whole calendar of the campaign. In general, campaigns are U-shaped, right? They've got that busy start and busy end. But what happens when you've got a 2-week early giving window, and then you have day 1 of a 2-day campaign and day 2? We can actually, for all intents and purposes, you could actually say that GiveBIG is not just U-shape, it's like W or triple V shape, because you have multiple periods where, depending on how you market to your donors, you have that shape coming into play, and therefore you might be able to use your match to either lean in to the periods of time where we know we're going to see increased activity and really lay it on thick. Or the other strategy is to dole out a match in that kind of doldrum zone and try to defeat that lack of momentum and get back faster to the part of your campaign where you're approaching your goal and the gifts are just going to start piling on. So sort of different ways to create urgency at different times that might, again, help us get to that goal faster and sooner and ultimately achieve raising more money because of it. And again, there might be a match that you want to include your peer-to-peer fundraisers on, and there might be a match you don't. I can see a world in which, if you have an acquisition goal, you might have one match where your peer-to-peer dollars apply, but they don't apply to a participatory match. I'm not sure, why you might want to do that, but it's interesting to think about a more sophisticated strategy with peer-to-peer when you are able to choose whether you can include them in the matches or not. And having multiple matches where there is something for them could really help with that piece. So that's the multiple matches piece. Let's talk about the timing. So given the U shape of the campaigns, here are some really wise times to deploy your matches, potentially multiple matches. And again, it changes based on your choices for how much you're leaning into early giving. Some organizations don't do early giving and they just, turn it on, or they don't market early giving. A lot of times you can go in and find the page and people will do what they're going to do. But if you're not marketing early giving and you're not leaning into it, then you might be better off, offering that match right out of the starting gate on day 1. Or you might want to do it on day 2, right? That's sort of halfway through. Maybe you've lost a little momentum, which is normal and natural. Maybe a match at that point in time could really kick things into gear again. And again, get you closer to that acceleration and goal moment. I have seen folks in different situations, not with GiveBIG necessarily because the tool didn't allow for it previously, but with similarly sophisticated tools, do things like, put on social media or email, we're going to match in the next hour only. Well, that's technically supported by this system. I wouldn't advise it because I think a lot of people may not even see the communications you're putting out that have what I would call a micro match offer in it, sort of very, very short offer. And then I think people might actually be upset that like, oh, I missed that window. I can't believe it was only an hour. So I just wanted to name that I've seen people try to do that. And I think it actually is counterproductive. But I would pick something a little more strategic and either for a full day or your full 2-day campaign. And if you've got multiples, really starting to think about how you're differentiating a match for early giving and a match for the 2-day campaign, the main campaign. Sourcing your match. This is another one where we'll come back to it when we talk about equity. Where are you going to get this match from? I mean, the very classic idea is who's matched you in the past? You will often have a board member or a volunteer who loves offering a match. I'm the Teen Tix board president, and I just offered a match for their virtual gala, and that tickled me pink, and I really love doing it. So it may be that you have the classic match giver who always does your match lurking, and it's just time to renew them. If you don't, why don't you take a couple years of GiveBIG data and look and see who's surfacing as somebody who's clearly really enthusiastic, whether they've made large gifts multiple years in a row, or simply they've participated and grown their giving multiple years in a row. Some people really love this day, and it might be a chance for them to leverage their own resources in a different way if you ask them to provide a match. I love approaching a pool of people to create a match from their pooled gifts, which really does allow folks who may not be able to give $1,000 or $5,000 at a time to feel like their dollars are going to go the extra mile, not to be matched, but to be the matcher. And so there's an equity lens here as well to think about that versus one donor. And another one might be corporations are more likely local businesses. If you don't have significant, big player in town corporate relationships, that's okay. There might be someone on your board who owns a small business or a service business or a retail store who would be able to provide, a modestly sized match or whatever. I won't prognosticate about how much money small businesses could afford to put into something like this, but it's great PR. And this would be a really cool way to just give a gravity boost to a relationship you might already have with a company, and get them a little bit more love from your community and be able to shout them out a little bit more. I love that. Let's wrap this up by thinking about applying an equity lens to the whole picture. So think through whether you want to do a match percent or a threshold match. Again, because we know that there's a participatory option with the threshold, if you're really wanting to, fine tooth comb through this for every opportunity to bring equity into the picture, you might consider doing a threshold match instead. You can still make it based on dollars if you want, but those participation ones, they're really cool. And I would encourage people to experiment with them. And there is a setting that we looked at where you can enforce a maximum dollar amount per gift that is going to get matched. I would enforce that again, so that there's a greater chance that people who are making 5 or 10 or 15 or whatever, smaller gifts, that they actually get, there's enough match left for them to have it applied to their giving and for them to be motivated by it. Match conditions. I would encourage you, if equity is a foremost concern, maybe don't set the minimum amount per donation before the match applies, right? That would be a situation where you could say, my minimum is $10 and therefore people who are giving 5 don't get matched. I would encourage you guys to let every donor's gifts count, no matter the size, towards that match. And I would also consider checking the setting that limits it to 1 match per donor, so that if you've got someone coming in and making multiple gifts during the campaign, they too are not going to eat up the available dollars, and therefore you can extend it and broaden who's going to be motivated by the match. And where the match comes from. So I would just encourage you to stay aware of the power dynamics between donors and the marginalized communities that the organizations they support are often serving. That's a sort of general thing when we're thinking about major gifts or matching challenges across any context. But we want to make sure that we are aware of those things, and that the way we market the match, the way we message our match, the way we talk about the impact of the match, I prefer to do it in a community-centric way as opposed to a donor-centric way. And I would also encourage you to think about the match pool from many people of many different capacities versus one really higher capacity donor. I often feel like there's more validation to the effort from a match pool, and it really does allow people to be invested even if their financial capacity isn't that high. And we want to welcome them into these propositions too. So that was our blazing fast 30 minutes of content. And I would love to use the rest of the time to either dig into anything here that's interesting to folks that you're curious about, or if you've got specific questions, or frankly, anything about GiveBIG in general, although we will have 2 more workshops by me that will cover peer-to-peer and stewardship. So you could have some questions that might end up being answered by those workshops too. So I'll stop yapping and screen sharing now, and let's talk. Okay, I have a DM question. Where can organizations get access to past donation reports to identify big GiveBIG donors? Well, my instinct would be the easiest place is probably your own CRM. But I do believe that there is historical data, and Greg, you might correct me if I'm wrong. I do believe there is historical data loaded into the new Mighty Cause system. Is that the case? Yeah, so you should be able to look it up in one of those two places. Okay. And Amanda, who I have worked with, hi Amanda, how are you? Asks, if you have a match pool, should you list each match donor individually or as a group, as a single listed match? You know, that's an interesting question. You might want to ask that question of everyone who is being asked to give into it and just sort of gut check their preferences. What I have seen, I think you could creatively have your cake and eat it too. You could really market in your marketing emails and your social pushes. We have a matching pool of, you know, X number of really generous people. And then perhaps say at the bottom of that email marketing piece, you can say match pool includes name, 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 name. So we might be able to focus on the fact that it's there without overly valuing any one name or any name on that list. I think it's just about your recognition, the sort of recognition culture for donors inside your organization, because it could look really different where Amanda works at Holocaust Center for Humanity than it looks somewhere else at a different organization of a different size or mission or sort of way that it manages and relates with donors. Okay, those were the two that got thrown into the chat. I'm happy to be informal and just, you know, unblock yourself or uncover your face and ask a question away.
I don't have a specific question, but just wanted to say thank you so much. This has been amazing, and I appreciate all the information and your energy throughout, and very helpful information. So thank you.
Awesome. Well, I'm very passionate about grassroots giving, so I hope that that's coming through when I teach. So thank you,
Ariel, there's another question in the chat from Carol.
Ooh. Here we go. 3 matches too many. Last year, we got a surprise match at the end of day 1 that we wanted to fold in our marketing. You know, my hunch is if you're not having one of the matches apply to the early giving period, that 3 might seem like overkill on a 2-day campaign cycle. I think it kind of depends on how high volume your communications are. If you tend to send a lot of emails on GiveBIG, it might not be, you know, much of an additional burden or feel like too many. If your donors are used to receiving lots of communications, because that's what it would take to pull that off, is additional communications. But I mean, honestly, if you have one for early giving, then I think you could have, you know, 2 very easily over the course of the 2-day campaign. It wouldn't feel too heavy for sure. And Nancy popped into the chat. Hi, Nancy. To confirm that past data is on the platform and there are wonderful analytical tools on Mighty Cause, which is true. I'm so excited about Mighty Cause. I just want to say that.
Okay. Hey, Ariel, this is Samantha. Thank you so much. A lot of this is new terminology for me. So the concept of multiple matching, and it's all really helpful. We have been working just with a few like very new nonprofits who are new to GiveBIG. They're interested. One has signed up actually. She does not have a list. She doesn't have a CRM. She does not have a list of past GiveBIG donors. So I guess that's why your comment about accessing past GiveBIG donors was interesting to me. I didn't know if you meant there's a way on the platform where nonprofits could see who gave big on the past, and I just couldn't figure out where that was, or if it's not the case.
That I believe is not the case. I think you can access the reports for your own organization. But the donor lists for other organizations are not visible to people outside those organizations. But that's an interesting conundrum that you present, because you're really those organizations are operating in a context where they don't have any, you know, they have no way to predict what a goal should be, et cetera. So I can empathize with sort of feeling like you're wandering in the desert in that case. It would be really interesting to tease out perhaps how they might look at the people who orbit their organization and create prospect segments out of that.
Yeah. I mean, some of these folks they're from immigrant communities, and the concept of fundraising is very new to them, and donor cultivation is very new to them. So there's some mutual education, I think, that needs to happen, but this is a great opportunity, I think.
Samantha, this is Nancy. I'll hop in on this. We've been doing the GiveBIG campaign support program with immigrant refugee-based organizations for the past 3 years, and that program absolutely demonstrates that while there are some challenges in kind of finding the cultural analogies in immigrant communities, like what are the cultural values and cultural practices that relate to the way fundraising works, and particularly to the way that online fundraising works. That crosswalk is possible, and the organizations that have participated in that program, which just basically walks them through all of the tools, including the kind of information that Ariel just has given to you, that are available to everybody on the platform. Those organizations on average have raised 200% more after going through the program than they did before the program. And for organizations that were brand new and had not done GiveBIG before, they were, raising, around $5,000 in their first year, which is a lot for small organizations, and a great way to get started. So it is absolutely possible. The tools are there. The process is really easy, and we have, a ton of tools for people to follow. And if they get a team together on their side and they use the tools that are available, and they attend these trainings or watch these trainings once they're available after being recorded, they can very easily be successful. We've seen it happen over and over again.
Thanks, Nancy. You mentioned a cohort for immigrants and refugee nonprofits.
That's what we've been doing for the last 3 years. This year, our focus is on Black and Indigenous organizations. So there are organizations that are going into that cohort as we speak. But we've worked with probably about 15 immigrant organizations over the last several years, and some have done it for 2 years in a row, and they've seen big increases in their second year as well. And there's no real magic to what we're doing in that cohort program. Everything we're using in the cohort program is available to everybody. The only difference is there's a little bit of hand-holding that goes along with it, because we give them a volunteer consultant and some help with their graphics and kind of messaging. But the tools are there for everybody. And the most powerful tool is the one that Ariel's going to be talking to everybody about next in her next presentation, which is peer-to-peer. So if an organization doesn't have a list of donors, they haven't done GiveBIG before, so they don't have a list of donors to go to on the Mighty Cause platform, and their donor list is a couple of stickies with some phone numbers on it. It is still absolutely possible to do well in GiveBIG. We had one immigrant-based organization that raised $65,000 one year because they activated matches, they activated peer-to-peer, had about 5 peer-to-peer campaigns running. And this is an organization that had done some fundraising before, but had never raised anything like that in their history. So peer-to-peer fits well with smaller organizations, with grassroots organizations that are based in communities of color, because it's a people-to-people thing, which is what fundraising is all about.
And I just want to say snaps to 501 Commons for making these investments in, essentially anti-racist tracks of community training to make sure that these organizations have as much access to the awesome outcomes GiveBIG can create as any organization. I love that you guys do that. And Samantha, I would also encourage, I heard you say the magic words, don't have a CRM. I would encourage you to take a look at one of the, to work with 501 Commons, who often will help organizations transition into that kind of infrastructure at the same time. I do as well, but I do it paid. But I also there's a lot that 501 Commons can do to support an organization that it's very much at the beginning of its donor data journey. Even if not ready for a more sophisticated Salesforce system, which I know 501 Commons is really adept at helping organizations with, there could still be a lot of value out of bringing those groups to 501 Commons to create their technology stack well from the beginning.
Yep, absolutely. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Samantha.
No, I was just going to say, discovering for me, being a newcomer to the nonprofit space and the resources available in Washington State, discovering 501 Commons was amazing, just from the perspective of being able to support nonprofits more. So yes.
If you don't mind for half a second, I'm going to jump in here. I'm going to put a question in the chat. There we are. I really want you to, while we're finishing up the last 15 minutes of the conversation, if you could answer these questions in the chat. What is your favorite takeaway from today's training? And the second question is, what is one thing that you learned about in this session that everyone should know? So just as you're going on, please add your comments to it. Really appreciate it. Back to the questions.
I'll just mention too, since we were talking about CRMs, that like Neon, which was the platform we were working with before, Mighty Cause does have a CRM, a paid CRM product that organizations can use as a sort of a entree into having a CRM. And because they have that expertise, what you see on the platform is essentially a kind of CRM light for all of your data for GiveBIG, or if you use the platform year-round, all of your year-round data. And it's set up with an awareness of fundraising. It's not just data, it's set up to recognize the value of move management, of getting people to go from one donation level to the next, recognizing reoccurring donors, recognizing lapsed donors. There's a tool where you can identify any donor that has lapsed from last year to this year on the platform, and on your giving day, you can be reaching out to those lapsed donors. So you don't have to be sorting through all of that. It's on the platform. So just a whole bunch of tools that are at your disposal that function like a fancy CRM would function, but are available at your fingertips, focused on GiveBIG and making GiveBIG successful.
Awesome. We've got a couple takeaways in the chat. Thank you to Cinda and Lisa and Amanda. Lisa pointed out the focus on equity and helping every donor know their gift matters. Sky mentioned multiple matches. Carol also agreed on the equity practices for matches, and Amanda as well. And Cinda, data is strong that matches work. That's my favorite one, because people get really jaded about matches and they go, oh, that doesn't work. Oh, that must be fake. Not the case. Awesome. Are there any other questions about matches, or while we're here, any other aspects of GiveBIG strategy that you'd like to bring up in this moment? All right, we've covered it all.
Well, Greg, can you, I don't have this at my fingertips, but can you just give folks the information about the session that Bethany's doing? So there's a more sort of technically oriented session on Match tomorrow, and we're doing the same thing next week, which is Ariel's going to talk about peer-to-peer, and then Bethany, who's from Mighty Cause, is going to come in and really do the kind of technical navigating the platform side of it. We're trying this kind of pairing is a bit of a new thing, but I think it could be really, really useful. You just have to get past the idea that you don't want to sign up for two things in a row. And really, if you do all four of these sessions, you'll really understand the platform and understand how to make the platform work for you in terms of matching strategy and peer-to-peer strategy. And then Ariel's doing another one on stewardship, right? Ariel's at the last, on stewardship that helps you get prepared to welcome and keep these donors going forward. I'd also like to just ask everybody that's on this call to tell somebody, if you found this useful, tell somebody about it and get them to go to the others, because you know, it's kind of sad to me to think there's 1,700 organizations signed up to participate. And we've got 13 people, some of us here from 501 Commons and Ariel, so less than that, who are getting the benefit of hearing from Ariel and being able to talk to her directly. So please pass the word. I think the problem is we all think May is a long ways off.
It's coming sooner than you think. I mean, early giving is less than a month away, and that's a really potent period. So, okay. I think we can wrap up then. Yeah.
Oh, great. Any last call? Any other questions or anything? And if you haven't answered the questions that I asked, please do so in the chat just in the next couple minutes, please. We really appreciate your coming today. And like Nancy said, we hope that you'll tell other folks to come to the next training. Tomorrow, we're having one, and then follow along. There'll be 3 more after that. And all that information is on the website. So thank you so much for coming today. We really appreciate your attendance at this. And with that, I will let you go back to your rest of your day. And thank you so much from 501 Commons. We really appreciate that you're here today and look forward to working with you on GiveBIG 2022. Thanks.
And thank you, Ariel.
Yes.
Great job as always.
Love being here. You got it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Chitra, I'm glad you're staying because I see your comment